From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Capitol Report. I'm host Dave Perry, and co-host is President of the Fayette County Commission, Allison Taylor. And we have with us a very special guest today, Senator Shelley Moore Capito.
Hi,
Welcome,
Dave.
Senator.
Thank you. Hi, Dave. Hi, Allison. Thanks for having me on.
Senator, I guess, everyone puts Shelley Moore Capito synonymous with statesman and service to the people of West Virginia. And I guess my first question was, kind of let us know who Shelley Moore Capito is and what makes her tick and what she's done.
Well, that's a good way to start. I am a native West Virginian. I was actually born in the northern part of the state in Glendale and lived there for quite some time. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and we all live in West Virginia. My parents are gone now, as you probably know. And then as I became an adult, I went out on a blind date with a guy from Charleston, and we've been married almost 46 years, Charlie Capito. We have 3 children, and we have 7 and 1 on the way grandchildren.
Hey.
And I just see myself as a regular person. I've spent a lot of time with my kids when they were in school. I am a family person. I love sports, and I love my friends, and I love the state. So and I'm a very active kind of person. I like to move around. So that's pretty much me, I think. And you know what? A lot of people tell me, I am what you see. I mean, I'm pretty much the way I am all the time.
And your past service certainly has prepared you for Washington.
Yes. Yes, I was lucky to be born into a political family. Spent a lot of time riding on those parades and throwing back then they let us throw bubble gum, but
okay.
I don't think let you
No
do
longer.
that too much
They
anymore.
still do it in Fayette County.
Do they?
They do.
I don't know. Popsicle sticks are out. But Mom and Dad took us all, and when he became governor, we were part of public service, and I think that inspired me to do what I did do then, which was run initially in 1996 for the House of Delegates in Kanawha County.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, and that was no small feat, right, in a Democratic-controlled state
Right.
to get elected as a Republican.
Right. Things have changed so much politically over the years. When I did start, I think registration was 28% Republican, and there had been no Republican congressman for 20 years. And I'm the first Republican senator since the 50s.
Wow.
And it's hard for people to realize that now because it's almost flipped. But I think what it shows is that the voters, I think the voters always get underestimated as to, how are they going to pick and choose? And you know this yourself from local issues. Voters are a lot smarter than I think some people give them credit for.
And better informed.
Much better informed.
So how many years have you been representing the people of West Virginia in some capacity?
Well, I started as House of Delegates in Kanawha County, so I was about a third of the county. I won by a very little, barely won. And then in 1999, Bob Wise announced that he was going to be running for governor. He was the seated congressman in the 2nd District at the time. And I announced I was going to run, and I ran like crazy. And but that district goes all the way up to Martinsburg, all the way over at that time to Point Pleasant. So it was a huge amount of area to cover and very diverse because it goes through all sorts of West
Sure.
Virginia. So again, I ran in 2000 and I won by very little bit, and then I built my strength, I guess you would say. Lots of constituent service. Served in the House for 14 years in the House of Representatives, back and forth to Washington. And then in 2014, I announced I was going to run for the Senate, won, and I just won my 2nd term. So it's been, hard to believe, but 26 years.
That's a long time, and that's a lot of hard service, too. It's hard to put your life out there publicly.
It's gotten harder, I think. I had a natural advantage in that I had with my parents being both in the public limelight. My dad always caused a lot of activity around him, shall we say, and good activity,
Yes.
and so I kind of saw what it was like to be attacked and how much it bothers you. So I think I kind of developed that hard skin that you need to have. That's helped me. I hope it's helped my children. My husband's the worrier, so we let him take it more to heart. But I try to stay as close to everybody as I can so I can see what's on people's minds.
Well, I think that's admirable, and I feel like you're still very relatable despite having the hard skin.
Right.
So you're able to find a good balance there.
Well, you know, I mean, I have the same issues as every other, you know, I worry about my grandchildren. I worry about if we have people over, do I have the right things to make?
Right.
And, you know, does the house look clean? And all those things are the normal things you think about. I think about all that stuff, too.
You know, I sense from some of what you've said through public services. It seems like in the last few years, it's become much vicious and much personalized. And we talked about that earlier, Allison. And I think that's unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. I think a lot of it is social media and sort of the blind criticism that can come from that. And you know, I'll give you a good example of something that happened to me the other day. I had been on Hoppy Kercheval's program talking about both of my parents' dementia. To try to help as a public service. It was very cathartic for me to talk about it and what some of the solutions might be for caregivers and what I've been doing in the Senate. And I picked up, I don't usually read my comments, but I picked up some guy that wrote a letter, and he just was so critical of me for talking about that. And I thought, wait a minute, you know, these are human things. There is not one family in the state that hasn't been touched by this. And if we can make it better for somebody, and so that kind of surprised me a little. That, I think, is indicative of what you're saying.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think you can't please everybody
Right.
is something that has come up often in my brief foray into politics. And I don't think I have the stomach to do it as long as you have.
Well, I tell you what, I think sometimes being a county commissioner is harder than being in Congress, because if you're there every single day on the ground, you know, I have to be in Washington at certain times. So I think commission is a tough job. I think mayor's a tough job. There are no easy ones, I'll say that.
That's true. Well, what impressed me, one of the many things, as I was reading through your accomplishments, is that you managed to get on some very critical committees that are vital to the state of West Virginia. And of course, appropriations is vital to everybody.
Right.
I mean, everybody wants their senators on appropriations. And there you are from the beginning. You got on there. So could you tell us, just for people who don't understand, the scope of what these committees do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm on Appropriations Committee, which is critical. And just recently, for instance, we're here in Montgomery, able to get some congressionally directed spending to Montgomery for the athletic center or for the municipal building. We've talked about some water projects in Fayette County that we were able to score some hits. I think the closer you are to where the spending goes, the federal spending, the more helpful I can be. And that's a congressionally directed. I'm also expenditure. I'm also the ranking member, which means the lead Republican on Homeland Security, which impacts Southern immigration, drug trade, all of these things. I'm on the Environment and Public Works Committee. It has a lot of responsibility for transportation, infrastructure, but also the environment, clean water, clean air. That's critical to West Virginia's industries and West Virginia communities. So I'm the lead Republican there. I also joined the Commerce Committee about 5 years ago. It has a huge jurisdiction, aeronautics, NASA, travel, but the one I wanted was broadband, because I see the lack of broadband development in the state, and that's a part of infrastructure that we didn't have 20 years ago that we must have. So I'm on that committee as well. So I'm very active on my committees and enjoy them quite a bit.
Well, you mentioned the congressionally directed funding. I know that last year you were able to get $241 million for the state, and that's a huge amount of money for us. Can you explain what congressionally directed funding is and how anyone, any municipality or county who's looking might benefit from it?
Sure. Congressional directed spending is a new name for basically an earmark, and we live in a lot of Robert C. Byrd earmarks, don't we, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so those are the old days of bringing money, the FBI Center or ATF in the Panhandle, or a whole variety of things that Senator Byrd was able to do. Those stopped in 2010, I believe. And last year's the first year that they were reinstated. And what they are is they're me looking, it's not more spending on the federal budget, it's me as your senator looking into the spending and saying, hey, you know what, Fayette County could use some tourism dollars or some water dollars or other things. And I don't dream these projects up myself. I could dream some maybe, but not all. It's critical that people like you, Allison, at the county commission or here at the school or the city of Montgomery, for instance, contacts my office through my field reps here in West Virginia, but also in my Washington office. And we help you formulate your ask. And then we go to bat at the Appropriations Committee and ask for those dollars. We've been very successful. 241 is a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Sometimes we're not successful. Either it doesn't fit into a certain spending bucket, but it can be anything from water, wastewater, broadband deployment, transportation sectors, even some, it has to go to a nonprofit or a city or a county. It cannot be earmarked to any kind of private entity. And they're scrubbed, and they're on my website. You can see them. It's all full disclosure.
Senator, you alluded to broadband
Yes.
A few times there. Obviously, West Virginia is at a deficit when it comes to broadband. And we discovered that during COVID through the education department.
Right.
And I understand in talking with Allison that you've been very active in trying to secure broadband expansion within the state. And I just wonder how much part Mitch Carmichael's had in that process, or what kinds of information he shared that perhaps could help you.
Well, I started a plan called Capito Connect, and what it is getting West Virginia connected. We just passed the huge infrastructure bill that has at least a minimum of $100 million in this state for broadband deployment, but it will probably be much more because it's calculated on unserved and underserved areas. You know where they are in Fayette County and where the households are. And so with Mitch Carmichael in the governor's office and the Broadband Council, they are helping us map out all locations. I mean, they are mapping out all locations so that we can get the money, because it has to go to unserved and underserved areas. So you'd say, what is an underserved area? An underserved area would say your speed would be really slow, or you have a lot of disruptions. So you have some availability, but it's very subpar. And then there are certain areas that have no. And you can't get it there, Dave, because it's not an economic model that's going to bring in enough ratepayers to actually, the cost of running the fiber is quite a bit. And so this, I think we're going to get to every household, every business at the end of this project.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed too in reading the press that some of the obstacles that had been in the way to help the underserved areas have been removed, such as the FCC's minimum requirement for upload and download speeds were raised. And so now, I mean, very few households in West Virginia probably even meet that minimum standard unless you live in one of the panhandles near a bigger city. Right,
or in a bigger city where there's competition. The other thing that we have is there's an affordability issue. Can you afford broadband, even if it comes? There is a $30 a month supplement to those that qualify, and I think that will be significant in certain areas.
That would be significant. There were other bureaucratic things in the way too, where you couldn't connect a served area with underserved, like you couldn't go through a served area to get to these.
We're working that out. You can do that now. Actually, we had a guy from the Department of Commerce, and he told me last week, if you're using your federal dollars and all you're doing is going through another area that's served by federal dollars, you can do that.
Can we have his name after?
Yes.
Because that's come up, and I know like the mayor of Montgomery has been looking at even contracting his own broadband infrastructure here to try to keep the fees down. And I hope that our municipalities don't all have to do it by themselves like he's trying to do.
I think a regional approach is always better.
I agree, and I know we've been working with other counties at southern West Virginia to do that. In fact, Summers, Nicholas, Raleigh, and Fayette and Webster all got together to discuss broadband recently. But I did notice too that I'll have to refer to my notes here that you had looked in or were part of the Grid Act, which was had something to do with installing broadband fiber on the
On the
pre-existing
electric poles. And it makes good sense. You got electric to everybody's house. Why can't you just run the fiber right there? And they've got a big project in Logan and Mingo County with Gigabeam and AEP that's doing just that with the
Well,
commission and the economic development.
Senator, our time's gone for our first segment.
Right.
And certainly it's been
a good way to end.
informative. And Allison, very good questions and a very good dialogue here. So when we come right back in our second segment, we'll probably talk a little bit about environmental issues. Allison mentioned bureaucracy and perhaps prioritization for the state that you have.
Sounds
So
good.
we'll take a quick break and be right back.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report, where today we're joined by the Honorable Shelley Moore Capito.
Right.
Allison, we're privileged to have such an astute representative with us today.
I'm
and
excited
we
she's
left
here.
the first segment talking about the Grid Act, and I don't think we finished that.
Well, we were talking about, Senator Capito was explaining the Grid Act is an act that involves installing broadband cable along pre-existing infrastructure for the electrical grid. And I saw that some of the considerations had to do with cybersecurity.
Right.
It also has to do with the fact that the permitting is done. You know, the AEP in the state of West Virginia already has rights of way and things like that.
Right.
So it would expedite, wouldn't it, if we were able to?
Oh, it would definitely make it go faster. And the project I was talking about earlier about Logan and Mingo County, I mean, 13,000 residents is quite a few, a lot of businesses. And, you know, you have existing poles. There is an expense to it because in some cases you have to replace the poles. You know, AEP has to be very careful that they're not in their electric zone and all those kinds of things. But they did this in Virginia, and now they've come over to do a small one in West Virginia. Hopefully we'll do more. And I just think if you have existing infrastructure, why wouldn't you use it? That's why when we were talking earlier, if you're going to dig for a sewer pipe or a new road, run the fiber. If at least just run the pipe for the fiber, even if
Right.
you don't have the fiber to run through it. So I think there's a lot of innovative. A satellite is not going to work in West Virginia. It's
No.
our terrain is too beautiful for satellite.
It is, although I do think cell towers are something that we probably need a
need
few
more.
more of.
Yeah.
Especially for our first responders. That's something, especially here in this area in
Right.
the valley, up the
Right.
Hollis here. We have them go out of communications, which is really scary.
That's bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really happy as a taxpayer and supporter that you're doing that because, you know, bringing economic development into the state is something that I think we haven't prioritized in the past, you know, 30 years or so. Like we're really starting to pay attention to what we need to do to get people here.
We really haven't diversified, Allison.
Yeah, right,
Like we
right.
need to.
And you need the basics. We all know you need electric and you need water, but you need broadband
Yes.
at the same, you know, and wastewater treatment and other things, roads,
Right.
accessibility, and so these are the things I think that are the ABCs of economic development that sometimes we've skipped a couple on the way, or maybe it's too expensive at the same time.
That's true. And I read that another thing you're doing that's near and dear to my heart is trying to eliminate some of the red tape when it comes to getting the permitting
Right.
and things like that to install critical infrastructure, which has been a big obstacle. And some of the numbers I read in your press releases were alarming.
They are. I mean, when it takes 7 to 9 years to get a permit for a road. So in the infrastructure bill, in the highway portion of that bill, we were able to get, at my insistence, a thing called one federal decision. Now, this makes so much sense that you're going to think, why didn't we already have that? And basically, it puts one federal agency in charge. So in this case, it would be the DOT for highways. So who feeds into that? The Corps of Engineers, Fish and Wildlife, EPA, all these other federal agencies are going to be going through the one agency that's going to make the federal decision rather than what's been happening is, oh, you go to EPA, and then you go to Fish and Wildlife, and then you go to the Corps, and then they tell you to redo it, and it's just so lengthy and so expensive. So, you know, if you wait 7 to 9 years, it also has a clock on it. You got to get these things done in 2 years.
Wow.
And the permitting, and so this is a problem. It's a huge problem. We ought to extend it to our energy projects, our broadband projects, anything that is what I would consider critical infrastructure.
So is it going to be a cabinet level organization?
It'll be within, this one is within, one federal decision is within the Department of Highways on the road projects. It would be good to have that sort of streamlining permitting into the other things like water, wastewater, energy, and all those things. So we're working on that, but there is one in place for the highways.
Well, that's good news for us here in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And, you know, with the floods here in Fayette County, you know, historic Route 60 was damaged in several
Right.
locations, and they had to work on it. We passed a rock slide on 61
did.
today on,
Oh, no.
on our way down just from the rain.
It was pouring this morning.
That is important. That is
Senator,
important.
as you continue your service to the people of West Virginia, what are your priorities, let's say, over the next 2, 3, 1 year?
Well, economic
Or what would you like to see
What
happen?
would I like to see happen?
If you had that wand.
You know, I think all of us that call West Virginia home want to see that West Virginia pride become an economic development engine. We see it with tourism. We see it with the park, with the national park, with more people coming, and the statistics there are amazing. Even in Canaan Valley, where we have a new Fish and Wildlife Center, it's 3 times as many visitors in because of the quarter age development. So as we progress through this, I want to see the economic development, the educational system, housing, all of these things rise to the level of our own expectations. I want to see West Virginia girls. I have a program called West Virginia Girls Rise Up, and I want to be like Allison. We're West Virginia women leaders. We want to see the next generation of West Virginia girls take the reins of leadership, and that's something I've worked on, and I know you've inspired folks in your own county, so that's important to me.
Right.
And I think also the population decline in our state worries me
Yes.
for a lot of different reasons. I think maybe we've turned the corner a bit on that. And so, you know, I think economic development and good education systems breed those kinds of things. And I'd like to see that we never have another conversation that somebody doesn't have broadband at their house.
Absolutely.
And that we never have a conversation with a mother who's lost their child to the opioid
Yes,
epidemic, or father. And so that's my aspirations for the state.
Those are admirable.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Anything I can do to help with the West Virginia girls, I would be happy to,
Good,
because that is
we'll
something.
do one together.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I think those are great goals. One of the things that has struck me as a new public servant in the politician realm is there's so many sources of funding for certain types of projects, but it's very hard to do what Jenna Belcher of the NRG RDA would say is capital stack, which is if I have a $20 to $40 million project in Anstead, Fayette County to help the park adjacent, how do we avail ourselves of all of these different resources and in a focused way, because you know there are different timelines in the grant funding and
Different requirements.
and some of it goes to the state or through the state and doesn't necessarily get to where the federal representatives intended it to go, just depending on what the state's priorities are naturally. But
Well, this is where I think that our offices have done a good job. Our offices, being my office, Senator Manchin's office, the congressional offices, have done a good job, but could probably be even more helpful, especially now that we have congressional directed spending. We can help you formulate a request that's going to fit into one of those buckets that's going to be important. But at the same time, sometimes they have to have matching dollars, sometimes they don't. And that's what you're talking about. So how do you work? I guess it's a little bit the way the Infrastructure Council works, you know, how that when they look at big water projects, they'll stack Corps of Engineers with the community block grant money, federal dollars, and then you might go in with some state dollars, and you'll have a revolving fund, and then you'll have local match from the county maybe, or a private donor. I think that's difficult. So I think it's communication. I think it's education too, and maybe you're giving me a good idea here that maybe we should, our staff really feature some around the state, some little mini seminars to say, here's your funding sources, and here's how you can, as you say, stack them, or this one's always too hard to get, your project's not big enough, forget about that one. Let's go for these.
Right. And how do you prioritize? And then with the Fayette County Commission, at least this administration, we are trying to stay clear and consistent about our priorities. We're not all over the map.
Right.
Anytime we ask for funds for the same projects, hoping that something will come through. But it occurred to me as you were discussing broadband, and as I consider, the infrastructure, sewage infrastructure that we need, that it is so prohibitively expensive for a municipality or a county to afford. Even the state can't really afford to give those kind of dollars to one small community and not spread it out. But when they spread it out, it amounts to nothing.
Right, you can't get things done.
You can't get anything done.
Yeah, I'll use Route 35 as a good example. Because when Bob Wise was congressman, he was able to get 1.5 miles out, and it just sat there for like 12 years. Then 22 years later, it's finally, completed. Here's another idea that just struck me. The governor has just recently engaged, which I think is very smart, to have a person on the ground in Washington that's devoted to making sure the state doesn't leave any state dollars, any federal dollars that the state could get.
Right.
And that person might be, we get it together here and do a little dog and pony show. That would be a good person to have, so that they could pinpoint. At one point we left some money on the table in of all places in the opioid dollars. Recently.
Yes.
And I'm like, why are we doing that? And so that's what he's trying to prevent.
So again, our time's gone, and we
Thanks.
appreciate you taking
Thank
time
you
to
so
be with
much.
us from
Thank you.
Washington.
Love it.
And we just invite you back to share with us at some future point in time.
Thank you. Thank you both.
See ya.
Again, thank you for watching the Capitol Report.
This has been the West Virginia Capitol Report.